I mean, it's even hard for me to believe that I seen it, but you don't forget. And I'm nervous now just talking about it. I got the shakes.
Well, can we start from the very beginning, as far as, you know, right before you saw the craft, what were you doing, who were you with?
In the beginning, we was in the house, I think we was eating. My cousin went out on the porch, and he come back in, you come back in, you gotta see this, you gotta see this. That's what he said. So everybody went out on the porch, and that's when we seen the craft, or whatever it was. It was, like I said, you had to see it. It was the biggest thing I ever seen. But it looked like it was drawing something off the power lines to me. You know, I'm 10 years old, so I could be, you know, a little off, but it looked like a diamond, but it was red, like red, and in the center of it, it was a little brighter in the center, but then it like pulsed, like, you know, outward. And that's why I thought it was drawing something from the power lines.
Did you hear anything?
Not a sound.
Can you show us where on the ridge you saw it?
This big tower right here, it was probably 50 feet away from the top corner, one of the points of the craft. Well, the whole top of that hill was covered. Like I said, it was as big as a building, whatever it was.
You said you saw something a couple nights later. Can you go through that?
I was out at the end of our house. We lived in a mobile home, and I was at the end of the trailer. There's a field back this way on this hill, and there's a big boulder that sticks out of the hill. There was something standing on it, and I walked closer to it, and it looked like somebody in a hazmat, because the headpiece was wide, you know, about like this. But, you know, it looked like a human. I mean, of the other features. But, and being a kid, stupid kid, I had a BB gun and I started shooting at it. But it didn't move. And then I turned back and it was gone. So there was something there. After that, I was, you know, gun shy. I was afraid to go outside. And at night anyhow. But it always came between, I think, 11 and 1 o'clock in the morning. It was, you know, very on time, I'll put it that way, every year.
You saw it 3 times, your mom saw it 5 times. What was the time frame between the first sighting, the second, and the third for you?
It was always the same time at night. And it wasn't long after that we moved. I moved back to my hometown, and then I swore that I'd never come back to this road. But the diamond-shaped thing, you can't forget it. I still have dreams about it. Every once in a while I'll have a dream that's in it. And like I said, you felt funny, you felt static in the air. I don't know if you ever felt static in the air, but it's like the whole area was like static electricity.
What do you see when you look up? Darkness? Light? Maybe a haze so thick with man-made chemicals that it hides the stars? I live in Las Vegas. It's a city that's always shining, so at night, when I look up, I don't see much of anything. My name is Shannon LeGros. But maybe you already knew that, which means you probably also know that I collect stories. Stories about the bizarre and unexplained. Currently, I'm collecting stories about UFOs, or UAPs, or flying saucers, or whatever you want to call them. I'm in West Virginia, the Mountain State, a place I've never spent much time in, but whose connection to the unusual is inescapable. You see, despite its reputation as being out of the way, West Virginia has been tied to the UFO phenomenon for over a century. Want to know why? Well, so do I. In search for the truth behind the existence and origin of these strange objects people are seeing over our heads, most have stopped looking up. But here in the heart of Appalachia, taking a second to stop and stare into the dark sky might mean the difference between just another boring night and having an encounter with something that'll change your life.
As a kid, did you get a read that it's a weird state, that strange things happen here?
Yeah, especially in Moundsville.
Can we talk about your sightings, the things you've experienced for yourself?
The one main one that I'm pretty sure it was something, my opinion, weird. Mm-hmm. It was a very clear day like it is today. My pap and I were out shooting hoops in the backyard. I was probably between 10 and 13. I went to shoot the basketball up, and out of the left corner of my eye, I noticed something like reflecting in the sky. And I paid more attention to it after, I noticed it. And it looked like a mirror, like something was reflecting, like a light was reflecting off of a mirror. And there may or may not have been smaller, like little detail, like where it might have been multiple different lights, or it might have been different panels of something reflective. So,
did you hear anything when you saw it?
No, but my pap saw it. We both saw it, and then that's when my grandfather shared with me experience he had when he was younger. And he said, I was out playing in the front yard, and I looked south, and above the ridge line, it's like this dark, gray, brownish-looking disc came like over the hill and stopped, and then it went straight up in the air, and then it disappeared. So,
did you get a sense that what you were looking at was like a solid object?
It looks like a solid object.
Have you ever wondered what its purpose might have been in that place at that time?
Being where it was at and how high it was, it's hard to tell.
Are there any like mines or caves in Moundsville or in that area?
Oh yeah, I mean Moundsville's a coal mine town. Wheeling pretty much is too. I know there's a lot of old coal mine shafts under Moundsville. There's a lot of underground streams, a lot of unused coal mine shafts underneath Moundsville right now that have water running through them to the Ohio River. So.
So, West Virginia is larger than I was expecting. It's defined by its back roads and hills and hollers, and by a history that feels ancient. I've only been here a short time, but in that span, I've already learned about sightings around the state of strange craft, lights in the sky, and even heard whispers of government cover-ups. I've always thought of myself as simply a collector of stories, but this time, I'm trying to dig deeper, to piece together some of the clues that are laid out with each eyewitness account. But to start analyzing the case laid out before me, I want to understand the people who live here, the culture of the area.
If anyone would know, it should be him.
That's why I'm in Wheeling. It's a bustling industrial town on the Ohio River that is known as the City of Lights today. Its original moniker, though, was far darker. Native Americans called the land where Wheeling sits Wheelunk, which meant the place of the skull. So named due to the decapitated heads that lined its bank to ward off those attempting to make a home here. When the area was eventually claimed by European settlers, they made the questionable decision of sticking with the name Wheeling. A fitting origin story for a town that acts as an entryway into the Ohio Valley.
So, I mean, as far as West Virginia, have you grown up here?
Yeah, I grew up here. My paternal grandparents came over from Ireland in 1905 and built the farmhouse that my family still lives in today.
And how did you end up in Wheeling?
You know, that's a good question. Family lore is that we came in through New York and we kind of traveled around for a little while. But it seems like people from the British Isles are attracted to this area, and I think it's because it's the same mountain range. We have a common bond here with these mountains. It's like the bones of the world almost.
How long have you owned the restaurant?
We've been in downtown West Virginia for 6.5 years.
What about, weird stories? I mean, you're probably familiar with Mothman, everybody is, but what about other stories in the area?
Point Pleasant does the Mothman Festival every year, and they've been doing that for a long time, but I feel like especially recently, it's really caught hold of the cultural zeitgeist in the state. But the supernatural stuff is really strong in Appalachia. I've spent some time down in Canaan Valley in the Davis-Thomas, West Virginia area, and there's just a lot of weird stuff, and people are diving a little deeper into that than they have in a long time. But there's just something about the hills and the hollows of this area that, man, especially the light quality and then at dawn or dusk, like I've seen all kinds of weird shit. I'm not prepared to say what it is, but I've seen plenty of things, and I feel like, again, our brain has this false pattern recognition, and we put together the puzzle in a certain way to make sense of our experiences. And, I think there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't understand.
Ground deposits, West Virginia has coal enough to last the nation for generations.
Tell us about the state of West Virginia and its ties to coal mining.
Coal mining is a very important part of West Virginia history. It's been going on for over 150, 200 years. Helped build America, helped power America, helped us win 2 world wars. It is fully ingrained into people's personalities even, what mining is, it's more than a job, it's more than an occupation. It is everything to a lot of people. In terms of UFOs, aliens, the Mothman pulls you in as a young age. I saw the movie when it came out, then bought the book thinking that it would be similar, and it's a lot better. Been hooked into it ever since.
Appalachia is nothing if not a haven for stories and storytellers. One of the keepers of the Mountain State's legends and lore was author, poet, tour guide, and mother, Susan Shepard. I've been aware of Susan's work for years, but this was our first time to meet. And to hear her unfold years of paranormal history in minutes was truly a thrill, and offered a unique insight into how stories are told and retold. If anyone is aware of the Appalachians' ufological history, it was Susan.
What were some of the commonalities of UFO sightings that were taking place during that time frame? What were people seeing?
Well, mostly lights in the sky was big among them. There was one case where my former mother-in-law was stepping out of the house one evening, and there were these spinning lights, just these spinning lights right over her head. And she went right back inside, and then they vanished. There was another incident where my grandmother, she was walking by the window, and she looked up and she saw in the distant sky, she saw a red light, a green light, and a white light. And they would flash intermittently. Now at that time, she called them tokens because she didn't really know what a UFO was. She thought it was some kind of sign. what she thought that, but it was mostly lights in the sky.
The oldest sighting in the state potentially was in 1950 at a place called Mount Hope. The mayor of the town actually saw something in the eastern sky near his home. He saw a light zipping about that was not normal. As far as I know, the records are lost.
The connection between the study of UFOs and West Virginia is, in some ways, there's quintessential cases from West Virginia that you have to talk about if you're talking about major flaps that have taken place in the United States. So it really is instrumental, although that's not the first state people think of in terms of UFOs. I don't think that you can take a complete look at the topic without looking at the cases from the Mountain State of Flatwoods as one that is gaining notoriety, and if you look back historically, it's one that has to be dealt with along with many of the major flaps of the 1950s.
Any true UFO historian is aware of the Flatwoods monster case. In August of 1952, a bizarre being was encountered on a hill late one evening following a string of reported UFO sightings across the eastern United States. The creature was sighted by a group of locals, most of them just kids, during a terrifying ordeal that became a media sensation across the country. The event helped to shine a light on the weird activity taking place in the strange little state of West Virginia, and bolstered the name of one of West Virginia's most well-known UFO figures, Gray Barker. But before we get to Barker, let's visit the tiny hamlet of Sutton, home to the Flatwoods Monster Museum and a hub for ongoing unusual activity.
So how long have you had the museum here?
We established the museum here in downtown Sutton in October of 2018. A big reason why people come to the area, are interested in the area, particularly from really far away, is because of the Flatwoods Monster. So I talked to my board and we decided having a Flatwoods Monster Museum makes a lot of sense in conjunction with the visitor center.
Now, I saw something about a rash of sightings like around the 1950s. Can you talk about that?
Yes. As far as I know, there were a lot of sightings that took place in the 50s, and most notably starting with the Flatwoods Monster case that took place in 52. I think maybe a sighting or two that took place before that of UFO phenomena, things like that, but a lot after as well, going into the mid-50s and maybe even beyond. And I've heard a lot of stories that, according to the people that's told them to me, they've either never shared them with anybody else, or if they have just really close friends, they want to get it off their chest to somebody that they know won't make fun of them. Because obviously if we have this, they see a place where weird things are kind of, accepted or can be discussed without feeling ridicule.
The Flatwoods case became a seminal moment in Braxton County history. But what was overlooked in the days following the incident was the rash of sightings of strange craft across the entire United States, as well as other sightings of beings matching the Green Monster's description. While digging into the tale of what was once dubbed the Green Monster, I came across accounts in Wheeling of a similar creature that the local media had dubbed Bashful Billy. A long-forgotten side story to the Flatwoods Monster saga is the UFO wave over Wheeling, which also took place on August 15th, just 3 nights following the Flatwoods events.
That point in time in American history, the mid-50s, was so big for UFOs with Project Blue Book and everything else going on that it was almost destined, I feel like, to happen at one point in time in Wheeling. The Wheeling Intelligencer and the police department and the Wheeling News Registers, the newspapers at the time, had been getting flooded with calls for the last couple of days, from the 12th to the 15th, 16th, about seeing several meteorites, burning objects in the sky, things like that, disappearing, weird turns, weird low object flights, and that includes Wheeling, St. Clairsville, Zanesville, Ohio, Cambridge, West Liberty, Glendale, McMecken, West Virginia, including even Morgantown, Garrett County, Maryland. There was odd sightings all across the state, across Ohio, across Pennsylvania. Even Baltimore had sightings. And all this ties in sort of with the Flatwoods Monster, which happened on the 12th. to the point where the newspapers and the police department weren't really investing any more time into the whole thing. And then it culminated with this Bashful Billy sighting.
Around September 15th, I believe, there was a crash landing of a UFO. And it was shortly after that that people started reporting that they saw a monster of some sort at Vineyard Hills in Wheeling, which is a housing development area. People had called the police saying that they saw or heard that someone saw a creature that was large, 7 to 9 feet tall, had the ability to breathe fire, a noxious odor.
There was a lot of raising reports. By the time that it got to the newspapers, it was widely blown up as a half robot / half man, half dragon creature. There was a drawing that I found once that was almost like it came out of like a 1600s fairy book. It was just way overdone.
Supposedly a woman had been burned when she got too close to the creature. And there are some unsubstantiated reports that police were there and shots were fired.
The only hard evidence was reports of a police officer who had his arm burned and a woman who had supposedly deceased and was severely burned from head to toe.
It's kind of thought that when the story ran in the Wheeling Intelligencer and they called it Bashful Billy, that was sort of a way to discredit the creature. But a few nights later, he was seen, or a creature similarly described, was seen across the river, just right across the Ohio River on the Ohio side. And it was the same standard, a creature that was 7 to 9 feet tall, green body, red face, breathing fire, noxious odor.
I feel like, honestly, even if it landed in a different part of town, Vineyard Hills was a housing development, it was low income. The police, this is all my opinion, the police at the time had a very low interest in going up there and solving any kind of crimes, let alone paranormal crimes. So I feel like where it landed in this lower income area, it was destined to be forgotten, you know.
As a kid, were you very aware of like strange things in the skies over West Virginia?
I was. I grew up near one of the first Mothman sightings, and I can actually remember that. Of course, the strange case, 1966 going into 1967, where there was a church bus going past our house. They saw a UFO actually hovering over our house. And they called my parents, and that was about the time my parents began to believe in these things. So yeah, there was tons of things going on, this strange poltergeist, Mothman, Men in Black, UFOs, hundreds of sightings of UFOs.
So the 50s through the 70s, there were all kinds of things happening. There were tons of sightings of UFOs, of creatures, things like that, in West Virginia specifically, or just across the river in Ohio. So you get the Ohio Valley, and then deep into West Virginia. You have, this is where the big names come in. You get the Flatwoods Monster, you have Mothman in the 60s, you have the Grafton Monster in the 50s as well. Almost as if once one story started, then other people would see something similar, or maybe they were feeling brave enough to come forward at that point in time. As I've talked to some witnesses that were hesitant at first to say that they saw anything, but once they did talk to a few people, then more would start coming forward. But it's initially getting past that breaking point.
So one of the most infamous cases in West Virginia UFO history is the case of Woodrow Derenberger, who around the same time that things were really jumping off in Point Pleasant in 1967, had an initial encounter going from Parkersburg to Mineral Wells, driving a box truck, and he reports a craft by his truck, but then swinging out in front of him and stopping, making it impossible for him to continue. They had swerved over into the berm, and the figure got out, approached his truck.
A man steps out whom looks like any ordinary man on the street. Looks like he's about 35 years of age, dark hair, dressed in dark clothing, proceeds to walk toward Mr. Derenberger's panel truck. He goes around to the side window. He says to Mr. Durenberger, "Would you roll down your window?" Which Mr. Durenberger did.
Whoever this figure was communicated to Durenberger, he said, not by speaking, but by direct telepathy. The figure introduced himself as Indrid Cold and claimed that he was from another planet.
And Indrid Cold said, "I'm a searcher. I'm a searcher." Then he said, "Mr. Durenberger, why are you so frightened?" He said, "I mean you no harm." He said, "I bleed just as you do." And he says that several times to reassure him. And after about a 5-10 minute conversation, Indrid Cold says to Mr. Durenberger, "Thank you very much for answering my questions. We, not I, we will see you again." And when he says, "We will see you again," this charcoal gray craft comes right back down, begins to hover on the side of the road. The hatch opens, a human arm extends, pulls Indrid Cold up into the craft, goes up into the air about 25 feet where it hovers for a few seconds, makes a fluttering sound. It shoots away at a very high rate of speed. And within a few minutes, Mr. Durenberger gets back to his farmhouse. His wife meets him at the door, and she said, "What's happened to you? Why are you late?" He said, "Well, get me a glass of water, and I'll tell you why I'm late." Mrs. Durenberger later said, Mr. Durenberger could not have been any whiter if he had been lying in a coffin.
Durenberger was very public about this. It got into the papers almost immediately. It made Durenberger a media sensation, and he was soon being talked about both locally and nationally.
But it almost seems to me like they seem to target families for some reason. That same year, my uncle worked as an engineer at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He was out coon hunting with two friends, and they come upon this UFO. Again, dark charcoal gray, no lights, a man steps out. My uncle's dog starts going crazy, running around in a circle. The other two men run away. Perfectly human-looking man asked my uncle about different things in the area. And it was very similar. He said at the end of the conversation, "Thank you for speaking to me. We will see you again." He gets back into the UFO, shoots up into the air, goes away at a very high rate of speed. That's all I know of that story, because my uncle wouldn't talk about it very much. But, I've got that steel trap of a mind. And, everything I heard either from his brother or from him when they were talking, I absorbed it and I recorded it.
Why do you think so much unusual activity takes place in this particular area?
I don't know if it's just because that the skies are pretty clear. We don't really have much, we don't have smog, stuff like that. When it gets dark, it's dark. So we don't have a lot of light pollution. Some places, more than others. So there's that, and it's quiet. It feels like to me that there's just the better opportunity, maybe the better environment to see things.
And have you had your own sighting?
I may have. Well, I had a sighting of something. I don't know what it is. But yes, it took place about 6:20 p.m. I was driving between the town of Gassaway and Sutton on October 12th of 2019. Me and my wife were driving, and for about a period of 20 seconds while I was driving, the sky was completely clear. As I said, it was in the evening. The sun was working on setting. As I'm driving, I notice this bright object just setting in the sky. It seemed to be completely still, from what I could tell. And it had a yellowish white color that I would associate looking a lot like the way the sun's reflection looks on anything shiny. And then I realized, no, it's just a ball. Like, there's no definition to it whatsoever. As I'm looking at it, I'm just thinking, well, okay, so neither one of those make any sense. So now I don't know what it is. So then as I'm continuing driving, continue to look at it, right about that time, it just went away. There was a period of maybe like 2 seconds that it went from as bright and glowing as it was to fading into nothing. It was just gone.
I wonder sometimes if West Virginia has so much strangeness because people are actually taking time to go out and look around, to look up into the sky. There's just more time to be out and being around things. They're not in the middle. I mean, they have cities, but it's not like the middle of New York City where you're busy and constantly just moving about, milling about. You're into areas where there's very little lighting. You go outside, you just look up at this massive sky. So I think anywhere like that would be more prone to having strangeness occur.
It could be, it is a sacred area, especially the Ohio Valley among the Native American tribes. It was also an area that they were afraid of for some reason, and they considered it cursed in some way. But it could be the energies from the Indian mounds, the rivers intersecting, or just the plain old reason not much happens here. You notice, people notice it more. They talk about things more.
The mysterious green monster would eventually make its way into the historical records of ufology, written and spoken about alongside prominent cases like the Betty and Barney Hill abduction or even Roswell. Braxton County has since become a destination for those seeking out information on the famed event, with the Flatwoods Monster Museum stationed as a hub for all things weird in the area. Interestingly enough, Braxton County is at the geographic center of the Mountain State. Fitting, considering its importance to the state's ufological history as well. I could see why so many unusual events happen in this particular area. The nearest cities are over 60 miles away, which might account for the volume of reports in the state of strange lights and craft in the night sky.
We were just outside, David, his son, and I, and we're just sitting out there, and we happened to glance up and see a light in the sky, and the fact that it was not moving, there was no sounds, was what caught our attention. So we stood there and watched it for a few minutes, and it was basically coming slowly, heading in a northerly direction. And we just watched it, and that's when his son went inside and got him. I got my phone out and videotaped for about a minute, is all I did.
I forget what time it was, but it was after dark, and I was in the process of closing up the store. My son came in and said, "Dad, you've got to come outside and come see this." Okay, fine. So I went outside to see what he was concerned about, and I found him and my wife and Janet all looking in the sky towards the south of town. The object originally came from the south of town and came over the ridge on the other side of the river, and then it stopped. And that's when I came out and I saw it when it was in a fixed position. And then while we were all there, that's when it started moving west.
And it was just a spherical shape, and it was changing colors from an orangish red to a white.
In my estimation, it was about the height you'd see like a small aircraft flying, was what I would say was a sphere. And it seemed to be undulating between orange and white. And it sat in the sky for a couple of minutes, and we stood there watching it. And then it began moving west, like along the river. So I know, speaking for myself, I think a couple of the others followed me, but we went towards the end of the street to see where it was going. And as it moved west, it just disappeared.
And we just watched it just slowly move. There was no sounds. We didn't hear anything of like a drone or an aircraft or a helicopter. And then it did turn direction and start heading in a westerly direction. And then next thing you know, it just disappeared.
Any whispers in the next few days after you guys deciding that anybody else saw this thing?
We mentioned it to someone that we know in town, or actually just outside of town, and he had an interesting comment. He said that as a kid, he saw something similar to that, which means about 40 or 50 years ago, he would have seen something of that same nature, because when we described it to him, or I think
And it was the
David,
same location, it was around the dam.
Yeah.
Anything of interest in that area or in or around the ridge where it was stopped, besides the dam? You mentioned
The dam and the rivers.
I mean, you have a history of this stuff happening around the area.
Well, and I have a theory about that, but I don't know if you need to go into
Yeah.
that. My theory is there have been stories about military bases in West Virginia, and given the nature of the state, low population density, very rural in most areas, and my understanding is that there have been quiet military operations in the state. We've got the FBI has their facility up in Clarksburg, so we know they've got a presence. Greenbrier, which is in the south end of the state, that was going to be used in the event of a Cold War nuke attack on Washington. They had that completely set up for Congress.
Is there a history of coal mining in this area, like around Sutton, around Flatwoods?
Well, there is a coal mine over that way. Now I'm curious to know, why are you asking about the mine?
We've heard some ties between sightings of UFOs and coal mines in the state of West Virginia.
We left Flatwoods but remained in Braxton County for the night, staying in a remote corner on a plot of land situated on top of a mountain that happened to be truly dark sky territory. Here we met up with Ron Lanham and Joe Perdue, paranormal investigators based in the area. They've also brought a witness named Dave, who has had his own experience. Ron and Joe's knowledge of the state's history of weirdness will prove invaluable to piecing together the strange occurrences we've learned about so far.
But historically, can you expand on the period of time between like the 50s and the early 80s where you had...
Oh, there was the I-64 incident.
Yeah, I mean, there's just this constant stream of activity during that time period. Can you talk about that?
The I-64 incident actually took place right across from what's now Dow Chemical Plant. And that chemical plant used to actually manufacture one of the 3 necessary parts to make what we would call now weapons of mass destruction, which was the nuclear missiles.
That was the rumor.
And
you are correct.
They were manufactured at the Dow Chemical Plant. There was a manufacturing plant in the Kanawha Valley. Where Dow Chemical sits is in a town called Institute, and that is exactly where the I-64 sighting took place, where this UFO was 50, 60 feet off the interstate, and the gentleman that had the encounter got out of his vehicle and observed this thing for some time before it left, and then proceeded to actually make a UFO detection device. He alleged that it worked, and he had many reports that he took the device out on.
I mean, we went from the 50s all the way up to 80s. Yeah, the 80s, but the 70s was a huge flat. There were several good sightings during that one. That's when I had mine. And there's a lot of those early cases, especially the 66 and flaps back around Ohio and Point Pleasant, all that. Massive UFO sightings, which people just don't, for whatever reason, really pay that much attention to. They were witnessed by a lot of people. You have so many different things that have happened here.
The Appalachian Mountain Range is the oldest mountain range in the world. It used to be the tallest mountain range in the world. So depending on how long these UFOs have been around, it's a known target range. It's a landmark that, hasn't really changed other than the fact that it's been eroded and weathered away. But the course is still here.
West Virginia is the perfect place to conduct your business if you don't want to be seen.
A key piece to the UFO story in this area are encounters with the men in black, enigmatic beings who appear to witnesses following unusual incidents, often to question them about the event and occasionally to threaten or terrify them into silence. The men in black rose to prominence in the 1960s during the wave of UFO and Mothman sightings that swept across the area. Clarksburg native Gray Barker wrote a book titled They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, which detailed encounters with black-suited individuals around the United States. Barker has since passed away, but his contributions to the UFO subject are numerous.
So the Men in Black phenomenon is what people explain happens after they've looked into either UFO sightings or they've specifically had some sort of encounter with a UFO. It's happened both with researchers who have apparently been digging too deeply, or, like I said, people who've had an actual encounter. In the Men in Black, it's not always a black suit, but that's typically what comes to mind. Men show up in a dark suit, a black suit, and come to warn you that you need to stop talking about whatever it is related to UFOs that you were previously sharing.
The Men in Black would often show up within a day or so of somebody seeing a UFO. And there's one example in particular that sticks out. The case of the family, I think Christensen was their last name. They had just moved into this house. Nobody knew except their close family that they had moved. They had no new telephone number. They had seen lights in the skies. The next day, a strange person shows up on their doorstep. So this very strange man, dressed in like very odd-fitting clothing, again, strange mannerisms in speech and a sort of a sing-song quality to his voice. And he starts asking them numerous questions about, is this who you are? What have you seen? And then all of a sudden he starts dropping in other details about UFOs. Have you ever seen some of those? One of the children who was present at that time, she could see a green wire coming out of his sock and then going into his leg around a brown patch. The other thing that was very strange is that he said at the beginning when he came in and wanted access to their home, this is going to take 40 minutes. And it did. It took exactly 40 minutes. When 40 minutes was over, he shut up all of his books and his briefcase, and he left. Because of the strange nature of this, either the wife or one of the daughters decided they're going to watch him leave to see where was he going to go. He walked out down the driveway of the home. It's a fairly wooded area. A black 40-style Buick pulls up in the driveway, lights off. The man, he jumps in the car, which is a classic Man in Black style car, and it backs down the driveway with the lights still off, and he's gone.
Enric Holt fits the description of a Man in Black perfectly. And also, after his encounter with Enric Holt, the Men in Black began to visit Woodrow Durenberger at his farm. He thought they were the mafia. I mean, if you read any of John Keel's books, I think John Keel thought they were some strange race of people. He was actually frightened of them. And so was Durenberger, many people that encountered the Men in Black. Even though Cold said when he was talking to Woodrow Durenberger, "We mean you no harm. We wish you only happiness." He would say that over and over to him to reassure him. But there's just something not right about the Men in Black. Some of the encounters that I've had with them as a young person and a child.
Yeah, can you go into more detail about your own personal experiences with Men in Black?
With the Men in Black? Well, my friend Jeannie and I were up on the hill. We were playing up on the hill in the woods. We saw these two men dressed entirely in black, and they were measuring the hillside. One looked perfectly ordinary, except he was dressed all in black, Caucasian looking. The other man looked kind of Asian, and then he had like dyed blonde hair. Now, Nowadays, if you saw an Asian man with dyed blonde hair, all dressed in black, that might not be unusual. It was back in 1966. We knew to be frightened of them, and then we ran home. Later, my brother came home from school and said he and his friends were up on the hill, and they found this big circular impression on the hillside, like either an impression of a UFO or a crop circle or something. Then, of course, years later, I would see the Men in Black in various ways.
Men in Black reports, have you guys taken any of those?
It hasn't been necessarily a formal report, but just speaking with individuals that told us, when they were a kid that
they saw it.
They saw a Man in Black, or Man in Black came to their house. We've had one report that was really intriguing to us that kind of lined up with some of the bizarre Man in Black, where the translucent kind of skin and looked kind of weird and didn't know how to shake hands or work a ballpoint pen sort of deal, but that was just one account.
Yeah, there's various theories, of course, about who the Men in Black really are, or if they're even part of a qualifiable group. I think the most prosaic and simple explanation is that they are some type of government disinformation group that is seeking to, if they are behind what people have seen, then they're following up on that sighting by further, either trying to find out what they saw and get a description for their own data gathering purposes, or if it's an entire sort of psychological operation to just chart what people, how they are reacting to the strange goings on in their area and that they have experienced.
Whether or not Indrid Cold and the Men in Black have any ties to the military is debatable, but all of this talk about them reminded me of a conversation I had with my friend Mark Muncy. Mark is a paranormal author and historian based in Florida who grew up in Appalachia and who had come across a story regarding Indrid Cold, which might help put together some pieces regarding the origins of the person or being behind the myth.
So, Mark, I have heard that you have uncovered a brand new Indrid Cold story when you were researching for one of your new books. Can you please share that with us?
Indrid Cold is this interesting figure in UFO lore and research. There's some other sightings here and there throughout history. He supposedly turns up similar to Mothman. He kind of turns up in places right before bad things happen or just after bad things happen. And one of the incidents from Florida's past I was researching was known as the Crestview incident. This happened in 1967 in April. This was a UFO incident. A school, a bunch of students at a school saw an unusual aircraft. Tons of students see it. Teachers see it. There's no keeping kids in school. This thing's flying right outside. It's got little ones with it. It's a big classic saucer. Yeah, everybody's like, wow, well, that was crazy. But then the military show up and they start interrogating the students and the teachers as witnesses. The story in the paper says unusual craft sighted was helicopters, and it disappears. It goes out of the papers. Nobody talks about it again for 50 years. Well, the advent of social media, suddenly these kids are like, wait a minute, it wasn't helicopters. I saw something weird. What did you see? And a lot of them start talking and start getting in touch with each other. They kind of form a group online. I reached out to that group when I was told about it, and when that group got me, I was like, okay, tell me about this. Tell me about this. And I started talking to each one that was willing to talk to me. I got to talk to one in particular. He had met with government agents, had come to his house to talk to him after the incident. His father had kept the names of the men who had asked him questions. He had the note that his dad, a little, basically journal of everybody he had talked to. A Lieutenant Smith, there was a Captain Sinclair from the Coast Guard, but then the third name just said Government Man Cold. This would have been 6 months after Indrid's encounter with Derenberger. Is he working with the government now? And I'm like, do you remember the guy? And he said, yeah, he just kind of stood there, weird suit, and just smiled at me the whole time. I don't remember him asking any questions. Is Indrid Cold working with the government? You know, has he become the Men in Black, you know, that we hear so much about? It would make a lot of sense. You want to talk bombshell, it's like goosebumps still, you know, thinking about it and seeing that piece of paper.
Yeah, I think we get into issues with UFOs when we start talking about UFOs because it draws this image into people's heads of alien spacecraft. It's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about an unidentified flying object, or UAPs, unidentified, you know, aerial phenomena, which could be nocturnal lights, you know, and we don't know what that is. We have no clue what that is. These things have been happening around here for a very long time. I mean, you can talk to a lot of people and they'll tell you, you know, they've seen things. You know, my grandmother, back in the days when she was growing up, there was a bright light that came down and it splawed out in the field. Well, I thought that was probably a meteorite. Right. So, you know, as I got older, I went out and tried to find that, but no, never found it. I don't necessarily believe that we're dealing with a modern phenomena, as some people believe.
Well, Dave, thanks for coming out to talk to us. So I heard you had a sighting. That's quite interesting.
Of course, this was in Davis, in West Virginia, north of the Dolly Sods Wilderness and the Canadian Wildlife Refuge. My wife and I were actually up there vacationing for the week, and this was on June 30th, on a Tuesday night over the course of this year. It's a really odd area, but it's quite beautiful. But anyways, we wanted just to do some astronomy. And we drove out there with a telescope and, of course, star maps and everything to do some stuff. And we got parked, and we probably weren't even out there maybe 15 minutes. And we looked up in the northwestern sky, and we just saw this object, just like a golden tan collar object, just pop into the sky. Of course, it went from the northwest to southwest, and then when it got towards the southeast, it just jolted, like did this weird like jolt thing, and then just disappeared. And then a second later, I was looking down, looking at my wife, and she looked up and yelled at me and said, "Hey, there's another one." And then as she looked up, another came across the sky. And in the same trajectory. And it did the same thing, it did a little jitter, and just poof, it was gone.
How long did you see each thing when they blinked in and then by the time they left?
Not even maybe 2 minutes. And then it was a nice sight. It was too fast to be an airplane, too slow to be a satellite. It just shows the whole trajectory of it, where we drove up from Fire Road 70 from Davis. And of course the trajectory of both the first and second object that went across the sky towards the Dolly Sods Wilderness. I believe, you know, that obviously there's something going on that we can't explain. Of course, with it being UFO, I mean, it could be a military craft for all we know, because we don't know everything that they have right now, obviously. But that's just basically the whole experience.
The more time I spent in West Virginia, the more I felt like I wasn't seeing the big picture. At this point, I'd talked to numerous witnesses and learned about a number of fascinating sightings, both historic and present day. But what connected them? While conducting his interview about their sighting in Sutton, Lewis had hinted at the possibilities of a military angle to the sightings of UFOs in the state. Dave similarly wasn't ruling out the possibility of the light he'd seen in the skies near Dolly Sods belonging to a military craft. Whispers of military operations in West Virginia have been a part of the state's lore for decades. Rumors of underground bases dotting the Appalachian mountain range that runs through the state are nearly as widespread as sightings of Mothman or UFOs. The NSA, FBI, Army, and National Guard all operate out of the region, but those are the known locations. What else might be happening in the state that we're being kept in the proverbial dark about? Well, thanks for doing this with us today. So you have seen something highly anomalous?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead and tell that story to us.
I was 13 years old. It was May of 1997. The sun had just went down. So it was about 9:15, I would say. My mom, my younger brother, and I, we were on the front porch of our house. As we're looking out that way, we noticed this bright light appear out in the distance. And we watch it and thinking that it's an airplane. We realize that it's moving way too slow. And we watch it for about 10 minutes before it gets close enough to us that we realize it's something really, really large. We're in so much shock, we just watch it as it approaches. And by the time it gets to us, we realize it's at least from where we're at to the end of the street. I'd say it was about 300 feet wide. It was a triangle, and it might have been at the most 100 feet up in the air and moving maybe at 5 miles an hour. I mean, it was slow. And we just sat there in awe, like looking at this thing in shock. And I mean, we were terrified. Not a sound coming from it, nothing. Just floating along. And we watch it like travel past, and we go around the side of the house and we watch it go off into the horizon. And at that point, we're like, oh my goodness, we gotta get someone else to see this. So we go and get our dad, and he watches this light go off, and he's like, I'm not saying that you didn't see a UFO. I can't tell what it was, but don't tell anybody what you saw because they will think you're crazy. It piqued an interest in me as to like, okay, what was this? I mean, for me, honestly, there's, no matter what the intent is, there's nothing that we can do, you know? So it's not something that I really think about or consider, because whether they're here just to, you know, observe us, or if they're planning an invasion, and I know that's extreme, the whole invasion thing, but when we go to a foreign place here on Earth, it's, we're either there to observe, to actually engage the civilization and take samples and collect data and all that, or we're there to just completely take it over. And there was a neighbor that lived beside of us, and she swore that there is a government test facility for aircraft. It would be roughly, I don't know, 40 miles to the southeast of where we're at. A town called Elkins. The direction where it came from would have been that area.
Katie, thanks for chatting with us. I mean, have you always been interested in UFOs, or you just had your own sighting and that's what got you kind of going in this subject?
I've always been interested in UFOs because of my grandfather, who was part of Project Blue Book and who worked before that with NASA. He was kind of a spokesman for Blue Book, and he would give the line like, no, we don't find any evidence to support the existence of UFOs. He was a disinformation guy, essentially, even though he had his own UFO sighting.
Oh, well, can you expound upon your own sightings for it?
Yeah, I'd never seen anything in the sky before I moved out here. And then all of a sudden I saw things that, you know, I didn't know what they were. And the first thing I saw was from my deck. It was at dusk. And I was looking up over here in the sky. I saw what looked like a star, and it got really, really, really bright. And then it started moving around really erratically, like really crazy, like an insect almost. And then it just blinked out to nothing. Well, I saw another thing that was sort of like that again in that same part of the sky and from the same place on my deck. But I saw it at about 3 in the morning, and I didn't know what that was. And I posted on Facebook seeing if anybody else had seen anything like that or saw what I saw before. And there was like one gal in town who said that she'd seen that a couple of times and also didn't know what it was. So this area has a lot of military presence in the sky. Maybe that could explain some of the things that I've seen, I wouldn't be too surprised. But
Like experimental craft.
yeah, like something that nobody knows about.
Throughout our trip, we've heard about Davis, and specifically the Dolly Sods Wilderness. It's where Dave had his sighting, and it's also a location where my friend Les Odell conducts a lot of his paranormal research. There are also rumors of secret military ops taking place in the region, but the more time we spend looking into all of this, the more rumors of government installations and secret black ops involving UFOs come up.
Radio Astronomy Observatory in Greenbank, West Virginia. Here there is no industrial noise, no airports, little highway traffic, no transmission interference. The surrounding mountains protect the area from the crackle of Earth's atmosphere.
It's worth mentioning Greenbank Observatory. Construction began in 1957. Originally intended to be just one piece of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, its ultimate goal was to study objects in space based on their radio waves. Frequently referred to as West Virginia's Area 51, part of the mission assigned to the facility was determining whether or not other life existed in our solar system. Today, the observatory is privately owned and wholly embraces its extraterrestrial history, but its mystique continues to grow.
The Greenbank Observatory is one of the largest observatories on the East Coast, and the money was accrued very recently after the Flatwoods Monster event and subsequent government investigations. It's in Greenbank, West Virginia. It's one of those areas where when you enter into this certain perimeter, no cell phones, no TV, everything's 1940s era equipment. Otherwise, the satellite can pick it up. It can damage the signals or corrupt signals.
Can you tell us about the Greenbank incident with the photos that you showed me?
Yeah, there was the guy got a hold of me through email. He emailed me these pictures, and he said that he took them in the Greenbank area. I believe he told me a cell phone, and he said he was just driving around and he looked up and seen this thing in the sky. And he started taking pictures. Next thing you know, there's a second one, and he's taking pictures of it. And what's strange is Greenbank is, my understanding, is a no-fly zone. So if these are near Greenbank, they shouldn't have been there. Even if they were drones, they shouldn't have been there. So I got a hold of Ron Lanham, and he was perplexed by him, and he took them and done the enhancements and done the 3D modeling to show that it's something other than like a bird in the sky, you know. But yeah, that's about as far as it went with that. I mean, the guy just sent me the pictures.
Are you aware of government investigation of UFO sightings in the state?
I've heard Greenbank has something to do with it, but there are people in Beckley area and in the Oak Hill area believe that there's more that goes on there.
How about your own personal sightings?
I've only had one, but it was at Dolly Sods, and that was 2 months ago. I went up to watch the stars like I do. You know, I'll just drive up there to watch stars. And I'm laying in my van looking out the window, and I see this orange light come across from one horizon, and it just moves and it'd blink and then moves and it'd blink, and it wasn't moving steady, it would just move to a spot and blink. And then they got so far over and it blinked and went out, and then I could see it blink again, and it shot like in an angle and started blinking again and moved over again, and then eventually just went off.
Thanks for taking us out here.
This is where I seen, the light I seen was right, like I was sitting over here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually laying in my van. And it was right over here along this side, like in this area of the sky here.
You feel like it was maybe conventional?
The way it moved, I mean, I couldn't say it was a UFO.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because I couldn't see it. All I saw was the light. But it moved. As it moved forward, it stopped. It seemed like it stopped blinking, and then it seemed like it shot in the Z pattern, shot down in an angle, started blinking again, and then it kept on going so far this way, and that was it. I lost it and didn't see it anymore.
All right, so,
okay, so Matt,
where we at?
So let's tell them what you spotted first, and I actually was able to pick it up too.
Yeah, so right over in that area, going pretty fast, we saw a consistent bluish light going pretty quickly, and it disappeared. It disappeared, and then it came back and disappeared. Now it's gone. Whoa, I've never seen anything move that quickly through the sky. It was
actually really far away.
Yeah.
That's what's impressive, is because the second you said it, I locked eyes on it, and it was so far, but it was smooth and going extremely fast.
Yeah.
Something to go, where that plane is,
Mm-hmm.
look how far it's been in this, it's been going and going in the sky.
And comparing the speed of the plane to what it was doing was just significantly quicker.
Yeah, that is a huge difference between what was there and then that.
I never saw it.
It was weird, man. It turned off and then you could see it again.
I lost the airplane.
Oh, yeah. Was that an airplane? Because we just lost it.
Oh, that is weird. Hey, Shannon, that one just disappeared.
I have it on film.
Yeah.
So, watch. So right here, right where my finger's at.
Uh-huh.
See? So watch that zone. Because I was trying to get focus. You're seeing it move.
Oh yeah, you're like, was that an airplane? Because I just
Because it's there, you'll see it move, and then it goes away.
Oh, I think I just saw it
Right.
behind it, and then it goes.
Right
Hold
there,
on.
right. So see, there's those
Okay,
two
yeah, yeah.
pieces. You're
Hold
gonna see
on.
the bottom one move. Watch. It's moving, 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 and then it goes away. It's gone.
Whoa.
That's
That
awesome.
literally moved like.
That's
couple,
awesome.
Like, couple, maybe I
That's
don't know,
cool.
that far up, 1,000 feet, 10. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but we
That was-
definitely.
okay, that was
You
cool.
want to see that stuff?
You gotta see this.
That's size.
Whoa.
Quicker.
I've officially seen a UFO.
Holy crap.
That's for real. That's legit. That was legit.
The objects or lights we saw that night are unidentifiable. Could they be known aircraft? Sure, maybe. But they bear startling similarities to what Dave and Les saw in the same area, right down to the fact that they disappeared without a trace. The camera didn't quite do justice to the low altitudes they seemed to be flying at, and against a sky full of bright stars, you almost had to be there to really get the full effect. Which I now realize is something that witnesses say to me all the time. You had to be there to understand it. So, I've finally seen something that I can't identify. I'm still trying to make sense of where it came from or what it was. Did it come from one of those rumored military bases? Or is it simply a test aircraft running maneuvers? If it's not of this Earth, then what is it doing here? Is there something in this particular area drawing it in?
As far as a defining characteristic of UFOs in West Virginia, I think the most consistent seems to be a light or a flying disc of some sort that will often be spotted in places where there has been a history of mining. There's a correlation, it would seem, between those two things, even to the degree that in many cases people report seeing what appears to them to be a physical craft suddenly dive into the ground without an explosion. And that's so often accompanied by some type of mine or location that has to do with that industry.
Are you aware of any other sightings in association with coal mines?
The coal mine areas, yeah. I mean, there's even one that come from the Kanawha area of the valley where, is it 2012, I believe it was, or 2013, where several people say they saw these large black triangles, like 3 in a row, cross over this coal mine.
Have you taken many or any reports? Have you heard of any reports? It doesn't matter if you've taken it or not. I'm just asking general, that tie together UFO sightings in coal mines.
We do have mines, and we do have episodes of high strangeness that do occur around these things. So if there's an episode of high strangeness, then it's sometimes related to UFOs. It's related to other things too, but you have to look at those.
The reports that we've all taken were actually in correlation with the power plants in the Chemical Valley.
Oh, you're talking about...
I'm talking about the big...
You're talking about the nukes. Yeah, that's a whole different story.
That's not necessarily the power plants.
Yeah, that's not power plants. That's way more impressive.
But recently we had a report that came in, it's about 3 weeks old now at this point, where a St. Albans gentleman had a visual sighting, daylight sighting, and it was flying through the Chemical Valley. He said the object looked like it was a silver kind of mirrory finish, and it was flying alongside an osprey. But he said that this osprey didn't have a stereotypical paint job that you would expect from a military vehicle. And then there was the single fighter jet that he said came on blaring up the valley. And whenever the two objects kind of came in close proximity, that the shining unidentified object blinked out and went straight up into the atmosphere. And that would have been roughly near the John Amos power plant. Instead of calling it the Kanawha River Valley, they called it the Chemical River Valley or the Chemical Valley. West Virginia and that's the Kanawha River area was home to all of these weapons manufacturing plants. Nitro is named after, their production of TNT and explosives for the war effort. And, there were sightings in St. Albans, and St. Albans is right across the river from Nitro, so these things could have been in Nitro.
So what you're saying is we could have basically the exact same thing that they're reporting at these nuclear bases and whatnot today, that we could be dealing with the same thing, that they were actually looking at maybe the components rather than the actual nuclear side of it.
Right, because at that point they were all separate components and each area was developing their own portion.
Kenneth, can you tell us where we are right now?
We're about, I don't know exactly, we're about a mile from the fish hatchery.
Okay.
West Virginia fish hatchery.
We're in the Bowden area.
Bowden?
Bowden.
Okay.
I mean, do you think there could be some kind of time between caves and mines and what you saw?
There's some mines all over the place. There's one probably, I'd say 2 miles from my house, a good sized mine. But there's mines all over West Virginia. I mean, you go to Eastview, there's mines. We went in mines up there, 150-year-old mines. It didn't come from the ground, it came from the air. I'll put it that way. It was in the air. And it didn't, when it took off, it didn't have no trouble like that. That fast. And it was gone. But it was something from, I don't know if it was from here, or space, or I ain't gonna say UFO, because what I seen was seen other times in West Virginia. I seen it at Morgantown. I think it was even seen around here somewhere.
So after going through all of the places that we've been, I kind of put together this map, and let me know what you think. But it looks like these locations that we have been talking about all correlate with coal mines. I mean, within miles or minutes in some instances.
I mean, there's a lot of abandoned mines in West Virginia, deep mines, some that go back centuries, and a lot of active mines that are even close to power stations in general. So I don't know if maybe power stations themselves lend something as an energy source for something like this, and maybe that's why. Maybe some of these mines are someplace that something can hide and be developed by something otherworldly or something right here.
The interesting thing is West Virginia is a heavily mined state, right? It's known for coal mines.
Right.
The western part of the state is not heavily mined. And yet you've got this preponderance of reports around Point Pleasant in the 1960s. Point Pleasant is a mined location in an area that is not known for mining. And if you extrapolate that out, the same thing holds true for Sutton and Flatwoods, where all of a sudden there's a couple mines, and those are places known for sightings. So it's not necessarily the fact that there's sightings happening in heavily mined areas. It seems like the big thing is the fact that there's sightings happening in places that are not known for mining, where there happen to be mines.
Right, even many, many years ago. Now, Les, we went to Dolly Sods with you. Tell me about that area in relation to the theory we're kind of going through.
It's largely a limestone area. The majority of what would be considered as a mine area. There are mines, you got like Buffalo Coal, it used to be there. There is a Matiki mine, and they all feed the Mount Storm power plant. It's just, just a handful of miles away from Dolly Sods.
So we pretty much haven't come across a sighting that does not correlate with an energy source. Okay, what about the idea, guys, of maybe these things just strictly taking out the power plants and the coal mines, these things coming directly in and out of the earth?
But there has been sightings in this area, just in Elkins or like the Norton area. I've had a few sightings from there of whether it was a triangle object or a disc.
This local UFO researcher named Bob Tietz, who wrote a book all about West Virginia, compiling his West Virginia cases. The theory that you're presenting was put forth by him as well, and one thing that he pointed out was that there were a large number of sightings in that book, historical sightings, older sightings, where people did see objects diving into or coming out of the earth.
I suppose the easier question, not with an answer though, is could they be pulling
energy from these sources? What is the purpose? It certainly kind of nods in that direction at the very least.
Yeah, are they leaching energy from these places? Are they literally coming out of the earth? There's books from the 1950s and 60s where people posited the idea that UFOs are coming from a hollow earth.
So basically, after everything that we've gone through, it still doesn't tell us much of anything for sure, just gives us more questions. But at least for our part of it, especially in West Virginia, it is a model that we can build on. The dark sky of West Virginia holds a lot of secrets. Apparently, so do its mountains and rivers, its forests, and its hills and hollers. Maybe it's all connected. Maybe there are extraterrestrial beings coming from the stars to secretly mine our planet. Or maybe it's our own, or even a foreign military testing aircraft in our backyard. Maybe the visitors are coming from inside the Earth itself. For now, I'm heading back home, where I'll no doubt continue my search for stories and answers to questions I haven't even asked yet. After all, just because I live in a city too bright to see the stars, doesn't mean I'll ever stop looking up.